Today we're dealing with absolute value equations. Notice they're equations. Yeah, there's an absolute value that we have to mess around a little bit with, but they're equations that we can use all of the principles that we have talked about before, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction principles, in order to solve them. With absolute value equations, there's one little trick that we have to worry about. Once we've done that, we can solve them. First, let's start with what we're trying to do today. We're going to simplify expressions containing absolute value symbols. In addition, we'll solve absolute value equations. Okay, so what is absolute value? Probably you've learned that any time that you see an absolute value symbol, you simply just lose the sign. So the absolute value of -5 is 5. Absolute value of just +5 is still just 5. Really, absolute value says, how far are you away from 0? That's what absolute value is asking. How far are you away from 0? So if I'm at -5, notice I'm 5 units away. If I'm at a +5, again, I'm 5 units away. So that's the definition of absolute value. Now, if I'm simplifying absolute value expressions, like this one, absolute value of -17, again, it's 17 units away from 0, so the answer is 17. If they include variables in an absolute value expression that we don't know what the values are, we still can simplify this to some extent. And basically I can sort of separate this into each little section. I can say, well, what's the absolute value of 3? What's the absolute value of b? What's the absolute value of a squared? So if I look at the absolute value of 3, it would just be 3. The absolute value of b, I wouldn't know because I don't know if b is positive or negative. So I wouldn't know exactly what it is. So I'm just going to leave that one alone and say absolute value of b, depending on what b is. Now here, if I have a variable that is squared, we know that if it's a negative number, that when I square it becomes positive. So in that case, the absolute value of a squared would be the same. If it was a negative number in there, it would be the same. It would just be a squared. So I don't really need an absolute value sign on one of these variables that is squared, because the squared already takes care of the sign for me. So I can simplify then this expression by just saying 3 times the absolute value of b divided by a squared. That could be a simplification of that. Now let's look at a couple of equations for solving for absolute value. One thing that you have to keep in mind, that when you're looking at any of these equations, is you want to focus not maybe on what's inside here, but focus on that you do have something in there that will change signs. Like the answer to this question here, if I wanted to know what would be inside there, it could be a 6, right? Could be a 6 because the absolute value of 6 is 6. But inside here, it also, let me erase this one, it also could be a -6. So whatever's underneath there, it could be a +6 or a -6. Both of those would come out to 6 as the answer. And so I use that principle to help me solve any of these absolute value equations. For example, this first one. I know underneath there, if I just get rid of this, I know that whatever's underneath there has to be equal to 11, or it has to be equal to a -11. So whatever's under there, because I'm taking the absolute value and it comes out to 11, so whatever's under there has to be an 11 or a -11, because the absolute value of each of those will be 11. So what I do is I use that idea, and I say, okay, whatever's underneath there, it just happens to be 2x minus 5. Whatever's underneath there must equal 11, or 2x minus 5 must be equal to the other one, minus 11. And now I have two linear equations that I can solve. Take the 5 over, that'd be 16 divided by 2 comes out to 8. Take the 5 over, that'd be, a -6 divided by 2, x is equal to negative 3. So these are my two solutions for this absolute value. And you'll find that when you do absolute value questions, you'll typically get two answers for them. Here's one that's a little trickier because it has two absolute values in it. But I can do this the same, I do it this using the same idea as the other one. So I say whatever's under here could be a plus or a minus of whatever's on the other side. So I just write that. So I can write 3x minus 2 must equal a positive x minus 8. Or, down here a ways, I'll do another one. 3x minus 2 is equal to a negative x minus 8. And then solve each one of those equations. Careful with this one. There's a negative out front. You'll have to deal with that. I might as well solve them. If I bring the minus 2 over, this will be a minus 6 on this side. Bring the x over to this, it'll be 2x. So 2x equals minus 3. Or 2x equals minus 6, x would be equal to minus 3. I think that's right, hopefully. This one I'll maybe do a bit slower. So I have 3x minus 2 equals, this would be negative x, and minus a negative 8 would be a plus 8. Careful with those guys in front. Those are our dirty negative signs. Okay, bring this over, this will be 4x. Bring this over, this will be equal to 10. So 10 divided by 4, I think comes out to 5 halves. So that's how you can deal with absolute value equations. The main piece of the whole thing is if I have the absolute value of something in here, let's call it x minus 2. If this is equal to a number like 10, then what I do is I say inside there, it could be a 10 or it could be a minus 10. X minus 2 could be a 10, or x minus 2 could be equal to a negative 10. Okay? One caution with these is that sometimes you'll have equations that may have, I might have x minus 2 plus 3 is equal to 10. Say if that was my question. Careful, because the first thing you need to do, the examples that we didn't have this, but the first thing I need to do is isolate that absolute value. So my first step here would be to push the 3 over to the other side. So x minus 2 is equal to 7. Or absolute value of x minus 2 is equal to 7. Then I could solve and say x minus 2 is equal to a positive 7, or x minus 2 is equal to a negative 7. But notice I first dealt with this 3 so that I could isolate the absolute value. Okay, again, hope that helps you with your homework. Enjoy these. These are nice equations.